Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. We're going to be talking about Action Comics issue 1081 by Mark Waid, Mariko Tamaki, Clayton Henry, Skylar Partridge, Matt Herms, and Marissa Louise. Mark Waid and Mariko Tamaki's tenure on Action Comics comes to a conclusion as the Phantom storyline reaches its zenith as Zardu, the Phantom King, has literally clawed his way into reality, and it's up to the Superman family to come up with a way to stop him and the still dozens or so Kryptonians out on the loose. Before they do that though, Clark has to deal with Mon-El, who, while he is helping, is very clearly feeling the side effects of the poison in his system, and while in a weakened state, he won't be a help to anyone. Superman tells him to return to the zone, and while we still don't get a proper resolution to Mon becoming something he probably shouldn't have thanks to the zone and being a physical manifestation of what the zone can do to someone, there is actually a great moment where Mon actually stands up to Clark a little bit, reminding him that he never wanted to be trapped in the zone and being there is a confinement without hope or purpose. There's just nothing in there for him. Clark promises to come and find a cure after they have dealt with the zoners, allowing his brother to return to the zone where he will at least be safe from the poison infecting his physical body. The family barely get a moment to come up with a plan when Zardu and the Kryptonians attack, catching the family off guard. Zardu orders the family to be taken alive since he has some special plans for them. I really like what Waid does with Zardu here and how he uses the villain's recent quote-unquote death as a jumping off point for an interesting new shift in his hatred for Superman, whereas before it was really, the old Superman imprisoned us, Jor-El imprisoned us, same thing as like a lot of the people in the zone, but now Waid has added sort of an extra layer to that as we learn that when Zardu was cast into the eye of the storm, he loved every minute of the torture that was being given to him and used the last little bit of his power to begin to claw his way back from the past to the present, spending what was for him a millennia bashing on the walls of reality in order to crack it open and climb back through, which we saw at the end of the last issue. There's a neat visual parallel with Doomsday there thanks to Clayton Henry, who does the classic Doomsday's coming through panel punch for Zardu breaking into the reality, which is really quite cool. And Zardu reveals that during his millennia long climb back into reality, he came up with a terrible and excruciating end to the House of El, having constructed a platform in Earth's orbit which will perfectly emulate Krypton's destruction. But the blast won't kill the heroes. Instead, it will turn their molecular biology into kryptonite, which will kill them from the inside out very, very slowly. Now this feels like such an early Silver Age villain plan. It's wacky and silly, and I just love how over the top it is, and it's just something I think a lot of modern comics are lacking. It's the mad scientist with the giant laser pointing at the city. It's that level of just wackiness, and I love that stuff. Last issue I also theorized how maybe Mon-El might be masquerading as Zardu so he can kind of spring a trap like he did earlier on in the story. And I was kind of half right, as Zardu in this book isn't actually the real Zardu. It's not Mon-El either, it's actually Martian Manhunter, whose disguise is revealed when the real Zardu makes his appearance. Manhunter's involvement was part of an elaborate ruse by Superman and his family to lure the Kryptonians to them, as the platform they are on isn't actually going to kill the heroes or explode or anything like that. In fact, it's actually a giant phantom zone projector. The heroes activate the platform with their heat vision and it blasts the remaining zoners back into the zone for good. Now this is a really neat idea to round up all of the remaining zoners, and it's kind of Waid putting all of the toys back into the box as his run ends. Though I do wish that maybe one or two Kryptonians did escape and maybe they go and find General Zod or something and they get involved in the story that Joshua Williamson is clearly setting up with General Zod in his Superman book. But I also like that it was left clean and there wasn't, anything that a writer has to clean up or has to put in their books because it was just leftovers from this run. Superman ends up getting into a fist fight with Zardu and manages to win the day, casting him back into the zone. And with the threat dealt with, the family return to the Fortress of Solitude and sort out some lingering problems, like what has Kandor done now that the prisoners are back in their cells. Supergirl reveals that the zone is now stable and all prisoners are full phantoms again, and the Kandorian Council agreed to go along with her plan, which was a reformation of the Phantom Zone and its sentencing, as now zoners will have a shot at parole if they prove that they can be honest and have proper patience. However, Kara knows that many won't qualify for this parole, but the option is there if they are willing to put in the work to become better people. John also brings up an excellent point though, since who will be looking after these prisoners? Who will be their warden? And thanks to watching the battles of the recent issues from the bottled city of Kandor, the Kandorians have elected Mon-El to be a good fit for the zone's warden, and kind of giving him a much needed role within the zone and a chance for him to also gain some redemption what he's done and actually become a hero and do something meaningful with the life he has been given. I quite like this role for Mon-El. It's quite interesting, and I guess this also allows him to be part of the Justice League Unlimited as well, because we know the Phantom Zone is a big part of how the League are like capturing villains and storing them in like cells and stuff. The Phantom Zone is now part of that, so I imagine he's now part of the League as well. I do wish he had managed to get a physical body though, because Mon is like one of my favorite Superman family characters, and I think there is a lot of unexplored territory with him that you could easily make into like a new book. You can make him like the cosmic Superman, you know, he's flying around in the cosmos, maybe team him up with Connor Kent's Superboy or something. There's some really interesting ways you could go with the character, and I'm just kind of sad that they're kind of relegating him to the zone still, and hopefully maybe that's something Wade might come round to and maybe fix the whole poison that he has running through his system. So despite the reformation of the Phantom Zone and how its prison system works, Superman is still exiled from not just Kandor but from Kryptonian culture as well, which means he can no longer interact with his people outside of immediate family. Unlike all of the Kryptonians, Wade doesn't actually put this back in the box, and I hope this is something that sticks around, since this is a big shift in Superman's status quo, and while Wade set it all up, there hasn't really been any time to properly explore how this will actually affect Clark. Hopefully the next writer picks up on it and we get, you know, little tidbits here and there, and hopefully we get to explore it a little bit more, because it's such an interesting idea that he is no longer part of the society that he in a part helped save. He helped save the bottled city of Kandor, so like how does that actually affect him as a being? Like obviously he's not infallible, so like what does he feel about this? And we kind of breached a little bit on this a couple of issues ago, but Wade didn't have the time to go fully into it, so hopefully we get to see a bit more of that, maybe in a different Wade book, maybe in the Justice League book, or like World's Finest if it ever catches up to the modern day. There's just so much cool stuff you could do with a Superman who is being kind of outcast from his heritage. On top of being exiled, there might actually be more problems as well. The prisoners are accounted for. Some might have flown a little bit under the radar, like the cyborg Superman, who was shown still haunting the zone from the shadows. I'm not actually sure what this was like a setup for, or whether it was meant to be a setup or like a tease at something that's coming up, but I think it's really quite cool. It's definitely the Hank Henshaw Superman, cyborg Superman. He looks like the Hank Henshaw one. So is it maybe like he's going to be tormenting Mon-El because he kind of looks like Clark? Is that like the whole thing? I could see them doing a really cool story like that, where Mon thinks that it is actually Clark, but it's actually the cyborg Superman. That could be a really cool story. But Wade rounds out his story in a rather bittersweet way, since Superman knows that he did a good thing, but he knows he didn't do it alone, remembering Mon-El and his heroics and how he must help free his brother from the zone and give him a proper life, is something which he wasn't able to achieve this time round. As I said before, Mon-El is one of my favorite Superman adjacent characters, and I'm hopeful his story will continue in some form in the future. Mariko Tamaki's Supergirl story finally wraps up, as after the revelation that the prisoner's brother was never truly real and never truly existed and was just part of her psychic powers, the prisoner comes to terms with who they truly are, a destroyer of worlds. Tamaki rounds out a Supergirl's mission, which was to kill the prisoner, and technically she succeeds, since when the brother aspect of the prisoner's power was defeated, therefore in the eyes of both Kara, the prisoner, and even the United Planets, she succeeded in her mission and killed that portion of the prisoner that was destroying all of these worlds. Thanks to the mission being finished, the courthouse is restored and a new judge is appointed, with it being revealed to be the little robot that was accompanying Supergirl for a part of her mission. The prisoner has also been re-imprisoned in the courthouse, although they have a more lenient sentence and now must learn what it truly means to destroy the world, so she is given access to data and books and records to help her in her research. This entire part is just kind of wrap up of the story and probably could have been done in like 1 or 2 pages in the last issue, but like everything else in the story, it's been kind of dragged out to fit a 12-issue story run. We also learn why Kara was sent on the mission by Clark, and it's got to do with Krypton's destruction and how one must understand something beyond destruction of that level and how out of pain can come something greater. Now, I understand what Tamaki is trying to say here. The problem is, this is a lesson Supergirl has learned a long time ago and has been done multiple times by multiple different writers. You know, where she has had to reckon with Krypton's destruction and make something better for herself and her future, and for, you know, herself, her cousin, her family. It would have been handled much better had they actually been a proper build up to that through the story, because it was never really hinted at that that was why she was sent here. There was nothing that sort of hinted at, you know, her having to deal with Krypton's destruction. And you can see where they could have peppered in like, oh, maybe she sees these worlds getting destroyed and it brings up memories for her and she has to kind of face them head on, you know, the death of her parents, you know, Argo City, all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't happening like that at all, and it was just felt kind of tacked on here at the end, like, oh, we've got to come up with a reason why Kara was sent on this mission. Something to do with Krypton's destruction. Again, maybe if the story wasn't cut to shit, it would have come together more coherently, but ripping it into 12 small pieces ruined it. Eventually, Kara does return to Earth and meets with Power Girl, thanking her for her assistance across the psychic plane, telling her why she thinks she was sent by Clark before they are both called off to save the day again. Action Comics issue 1081 rounded out Mark Waid and Mariko Tamaki's time on the series, as well as it being a weekly, as after this issue we are back to a monthly release. Wade's story was quite ambitious to run weekly, and while it had some bumpy parts, it was a hell of a fun time. And many times throughout the story it felt like a classic Silver Age Superman story, you know, just a big bombastic plot with, you know, an evil villain who has evil weapons, you know, planning to destroy the world. And then you also had him involve characters like Mon-El and even lesser known Kryptonian villains like Raz Krom, and it made for some exciting reading week to week. Mariko's Supergirl story, on the other hand, while showing some really great ideas and concepts, was stretched way too thin to cover a 12-week runtime, and will probably read a lot better when put all together in like a trade. All in all though, I really loved getting to read Action Comics on a weekly basis, and while I don't think it should be a regular thing, I'd love this idea of like maybe like a writer and artist get together and do like a 12-issue weekly run, you know, once a year, and it becomes like a once a year sort of event thing for the book. I think that would be quite cool. All in all, now that the 12-issue run is done, I suggest you guys pick it up. It's a hell of a read, and it would probably read even better when you read them all one after the other. I'm going to give this issue an 8 out of 10.